Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Planet Coaster Crimson Tower, in which we will finally actually be constructing the actual Crimson Tower, which is where this park derives its name. And this is I've been trying to think of a good way of presenting this episode, because I feel like it's something that it's quite a difficult structure to build. It's kind of similar to the Eiffel Tower that the Planet Coaster YouTuber Rubletrillions, hey look at that, I finally remembered someone's name, he made an amazing replica of the Eiffel Tower for his Paris park, and that was that video kind of is what I used as the basis for how I constructed this tower, really. So huge props to Rubletrillions. Credit goes to him for actually how the metal structure of the tower was built, but this is kind of my take on it. So my tower, rather than being based on the Eiffel Tower, is based on the Blackpool Tower. Anyone that's seen the Blackpool Tower can probably see the resemblance, or at least will be able to see the resemblance at the end of this video. So I feel like that's all introductions aside. You can see how I basically constructed this by building up that wall to the left out of 1 meter. I basically planned out how tall I wanted it to be in meters based on the actual Blackpool Tower, and then built a kind of scale using that brick wall there on the left, and then placed the crow's nest structure, or at least the base of the crow's nest, at the top. And now we're just building out one of the legs using the geometric art pieces, and it's the smallest kind of oblong. So I guess most of you all have figured out this is going to have an absolutely enormous number of parts, and it was a very painstaking process, because obviously you can't just build like one leg and then duplicate it around, because obviously the whole thing is kind of at a curved tilt. So everything had to be done quite slowly. This was basically an entire Sunday spent building this tower. So I hope you enjoy. I hope it was all worth it. I mean, for me it was worth it, and I'm building this park for myself, really. You can see on the right, actually, you might be catching glimpses of it. The first prototype legs that I kind of built without a photo reference, and they ended up looking not very good, so I didn't use those ones. But that's what you're seeing on the right hand side, just a failed prototype. I might use them for another build, maybe a sort of oil rig supports or something, so I'll save the footage of me constructing them just in case it becomes worthwhile me talking about them. But I don't want this video to drag on too much. So you might notice as well on the main street in the background there's another building, and another building might appear later on as well. I'll have to go back and in the next episode I'll retroactively go back and talk about those buildings and how they were constructed. But I feel like there'd be a bit of an elephant in the room in those videos if there's just a giant tower in the background for both of them. So I'll rewind the footage and talk about the construction of the buildings in the next episode. But that's in case any of you are wondering about the buildings there. So you can see kind of how I'm starting off here. So I'm getting these things aligned to the grid of the building by using those flat roof pieces. So the way this works, and again, this is the exact same methodology that Rubletrillions used for his Eiffel Tower construction video. So again, if you want to see what is probably a much better presentation of this, I would wholeheartedly recommend that video. There is a link in the description. But the problem with his video, well, it's not a problem, but like it's something he acknowledged as well, is that he didn't actually have a time lapse of the actual construction of the tower. And I thought, well, by golly, that's a niche I can fill. So I'm just going to show the actual time lapse. Hopefully you guys can figure out what's going on screen. I will talk about it a bit in depth, but if you want a really detailed guide on how to build the tower itself, I feel like there's not a lot more I can bring to the table that Rubletrillions has already talked about, and his tower looks a lot better than mine, so listen to him. So you can see I've kind of copied one of these legs here, seal off the gap, then I kind of select the whole thing with that flat roof piece there to keep it to the grid, and then if we just place the flat roof pieces in a square like that, they're kind of all separated to the same amount, if that makes sense. It just makes it much easier to get the grid uniform. And we do this for each segment. So obviously, the tower isn't one continuous slant. Well, it's not one angle. It's kind of a curve. So the way I kind of got around this issue was I kind of split it up. You might have seen just earlier me editing a Photoshop document of the Blackpool Tower, trying to break it up into segments. So none of the segments are curved, they're all kind of a slant, but there's a few of them. So when we combine them together, it will give the impression that there's a gradual slant to the side of the tower. So we have to, there's kind of two sides to it. So all of these beams are kind of slanting the same way. Again, we build one and clone it across 4 ways. But then obviously there's 2 kind of slopes to that. There's the side slope and the front face slope, if that makes sense. So we have to build these cross beams, we have to build them twice, because the angles are slightly different. So we're going to build them across, rotate, and then once we've got 1x, I was a bit lazy and just then duplicated it upwards. If we wanted to be really, really thorough, we would probably build that x individually each time as we went up, rather than cloning the whole thing. Although we can refine the angle just there. But I think for all intents and purposes, it looks okay. Not many people are going. I'm not going to be looking at this with a microscope. And as I said before, I still hadn't realised at the time I was building this, but there are no elevators in Planet Coaster, and the tower itself is too narrow to accommodate a spiral path, or at least accommodate a spiral path that doesn't have to clip through the structural pieces. So there's no way of peeps accessing the top of this tower, unfortunately, yet. Frontier, please add elevators. I don't know why there aren't elevators in this game, because they're in all the Roller Coaster Tycoons, I think. I'm assuming they're in Roller Coaster Tycoon 1. I didn't play that game that much. I was mainly Roller Coaster Tycoon 2 and 3. And I know those games had elevators. Anyway, I'm getting off topic again. So, like I say, I'm cloning this around. Again, I'm using a flat roof piece to get them aligned to the grid to make it easier just to snap them in the same place. Although I did have to do a bit of tweaking afterwards to make sure it perfectly lined up. And it never really perfectly lined up with the segment above. But, yeah, again, it looks good enough. So as you can see, it's starting to take shape. We're getting that nice curvature to it. I thought about just adding a little bit more structure to it as well by adding some girder pieces as well. The problem is that the geometric arch shapes, they have their draw distance isn't as high as other building parts. So when you zoom out too far, the entire tower disappears, but any building pieces like walls and girders will still be there. So we'd end up with just a floating like tower top with no tower underneath it. So I added those girders. I haven't added all of them yet, but I'll add girders to the center of the tower to kind of add a little bit of structure to flesh it out, make it look a little bit more densely packed for not very much effort, but also to maintain the appearance of the tower even when you're zoomed quite a long way out. So that's kind of, it was the best of both worlds really. So again, getting on to the next section, again, we just slanted very much slightly more and duplicated it around using the flat roof piece to get it aligned to the grid. And then we just do one side. Once we've got one X form, we clone it upwards. And then we go and do the X on the other side, clone that upwards. Then once we've got those two sides, the other side is exactly the same. So we can copy all of those and then just rotate them around using one of the flat roof pieces. So you can select the flat roof and then just rotate it around. Then once we've got one, we can just take the whole thing upward and rotate it around. In fact, I must have misspoken. I didn't actually use a flat roof piece, it would seem. It was a while ago when I built this tower. I didn't use a flat roof piece then to get it aligned to the actual tower. I just used the existing supports to get it lined up. But there we go. We're making excellent progress, it would seem. We're nearly finished. Just one more arm to go. So this is very tilted this time. But the actual methodology is no different to before. Just getting that, those cross X beams down there. Getting it nice and aligned. And then we can select the whole thing, rotate it to get the other arm of the X shape. Well, okay, I should not get too ahead of myself, it would seem, because apparently I didn't do that this time. Okay, there we go. So yeah, terrible job of that X shape, but we can just realign that. There we go. So we can fix the alignment there, fix the alignment there. And now we've got two X's. We can select them all. Well, hang on. We haven't got two X's again. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm just very excited, guys. I just get very excited sometimes. I just don't know when to hold back. Okay, that's enough of that. That's enough of that now. So yeah, just cloning it across, lifting it up, and lifting it up again. I feel like I don't need to be that descriptive of the video because that's the point of having the video, is it not? A picture speaks 1,000 words, and this video is 60 frames per second, so 60 pictures a second. That's 60,000 words a second. So I don't really know where I was going with this tangent, but yeah, now we've done two sides of the final slanty bit. Support, that was the word I needed. A slanty bit. I'm sure that's the correct architectural term. You can see me saving a lot actually when I bring up that menu, just because in case anything crashes, or if I change some design of the tower, I can quickly revert to a different point and redo parts. So yeah, we're not actually going to be finishing the tower this episode. And then it won't be for a while, unfortunately. So there'll be a lot of other buildings around the park. So I can't really talk about it too much. But the only thing that's missing from this video is kind of cross beams for the actual tower itself. So I don't know how to describe this without. But if you look at the supports, you can see they're kind of all on the. None of the supports join onto each other. They just join in the middle, where that sort of central girder bit is. When the tower is finally finished, there'll be sort of trusses and struts between each of the curved legs, like archways. I feel like, I hope you guys understand what I mean, but if not, and you don't understand what I mean, then hey, it'll be even more of a pleasant surprise when you see it implemented in a few episodes down the line. But there we are. We have the most complicated aspect of the tower construction done here. All we need to do now is add the top, or at least finish the top, I suppose. So I built the top on the ground, the idea being I would just then clone it upward. This isn't actually the top I ended up going with, though. I did modify it to look a little bit less angular. I mean, I kind of liked the way it came out in a way. It looks very brutalist design almost. So I am torn about whether or not I like this more than the design I ended up going with, but the final design was a lot smoother. Used curved parts rather than the kind of Minecraft-esque angles. Like it looks a bit too Minecraft-esque, I guess, would have been the description I would have gone with. So yeah, so we can probably just skip through the rest of that construction because most of this crow's nest won't stay here, but we can just add a little spire to the very top and we can add a flag as well. So I ended up going for a slightly smaller flag at the end, but that would make a nice placeholder until the park's actually open and we can just replace everything then. And there we go. Yeah, those roofs looked horrible, didn't they? So I started out trying to replicate the Blackpool Tower top, but in the end started to just twist it a little bit to make it unique, a little bit more unique to this park. So yeah, you can see me now just sort of starting to smooth things out, getting rid of some of the angles in the end. And obviously we'll have to add a roof as well, but I think most of that you guys will just be able to see it, and you'll be able to see quite easily what the changes were, and you'll be able to figure out for yourselves what the general methodology and process was. So I can just extend that path going around the base, and we can add, I started to spiral a path upwards just because I thought in case we ever wanted to add like an observation deck towards, like, you know how the Eiffel Tower has 3 observation decks. It has the lower one, the upper one, and obviously the one at the very top. If we wanted to implement something like that, we can just build a path going upwards that guests can climb and get to a kind of midpoint view tower. But I didn't bother adding that, and there's no way of accessing this path at the moment because I don't want guests being able to just walk through the girder supports. But it's there if we want it. I would rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it, so to speak. And it does add a nice little bit of extra structure to it. So yeah, you can see me here just doing a little bit of a cosmetic surgery to the top of the tower. And there we go. So yeah, nothing too fancy. It doesn't need to be any more complicated. And I feel like the architecture of the actual, tower itself speaks enough in terms of the not cosmesis, cosmetic appearance, aesthetics. That's the word I need. Cosmesis would probably wouldn't have been the best descriptive word for that. But there we go. That's pretty much the tower in its final form complete. We can show a few shots of it from around the park in various locations. Ignore the other buildings in these pictures because we haven't built them yet in this series, but we will build them soon, so worry not. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope you enjoyed the actual construction of the tower. Like I say, huge shout out, lots of credit to Rubletrillions, who kind of innovated the method for building towers such as this. That will be linked in the description. As well as links to my Twitter, Patreon and Discord. And on screen there is a link to the full playlist and a link to the previous and next episodes, although statistically the next episode probably won't be out yet, but if it is out, it'll be on screen as well. So thank you very much for watching, and yes, thank you for watching.